Okay, so in this situation, Melanie is given an endowment of goods X1 and X2 of quantities omega 1 and omega 2. Here, she is a net supplier of X1 and a net buyer of X2. And we want to show what happens after a decrease in the price of X1. And with this decrease, is Melanie going to be better or worse off if she chooses to remain a net supplier of X1? So over here on the graph, in the blue, we've drawn the original budget constraint and indifference curve. And right here we have the original endowment, so this hasn't changed. This is omega 1 and omega 2. And so with the decrease in the price of X1, this will shift the budget constraint and make it flatter, and it will pivot on the endowment because here endowment is the same thing as your income, which is changing because it's relative to price. But the only thing that's staying the same is the initial quantities that Melanie is given, so omega 1 and omega 2 will remain the same, but everything else has changed.
So after the price change, you can see that the orange new budget line is flatter than the old one. And since our previous conditions state that Melanie chooses to remain a net supplier of good 1, she will only consume goods she will only consume on the new budget line anywhere to the left of omega 1. So the bolded part of the orange budget line. This is the only way that her new optimal quantity of X1 would be less than omega 1, which is the criteria for her being a net supplier. And now the question is whether she's better or worse off having made that choice of being a net supplier. Well, you'll notice that the bolded part of the budget line to the left of omega 1 on the new budget line is precisely the points that were also feasible under the original budget line. However, we saw that before the price change, Melanie chose a different point on the curve on the original budget line. So this means that by warp, anywhere else she chooses that was feasible under the original budget line would make her worse off. You can clearly see that graphically by U2, which is her new indifference curve, being lower than U1 on the graph. So she would be worse off if she chooses to be a net supplier after a decrease in the price of good 1.